Meantime, JPMorgan holding an investor day in New York. Lots of news expected out of that. I want to get over to Wilfred Frost, who joins us with a look at some of the headlines and expected headlines. Wilf.
Yeah, Andrew, so the slides for the day ahead have just dropped, and the big headline is that there's no change to 2020 financial targets, despite, of course, a huge collapse in yields since we last got targets from them, which came when Q4 earnings were reported in January, the 10-year yield moving from 1.8 to 1.4. Also, a headline coming from this are their targets on climate change initiatives. They put this right up at the front of the presentation. It's on page 2. It includes $200 billion target in green financing this year. That's up from $175 billion last year. No financing of oil and gas in the Arctic, and limited coal financing, currently about 1% of their financing, and they won't do any fresh financing in that area. But back to the fundamentals for these bank stocks. Yesterday, they all sold off sharply in line with the rest of the markets. The biggest decliners were this year's biggest winner so far, Morgan Stanley, the bank with the most exposure to Asia, Citigroup, about 22% of their revenues, and the one that's seen as the most interest rate sensitive, Bank of America. JPMorgan was down as well, but only about 2.2%. And despite no change in the financial targets, I think the focus today will be on the comments we hear from the business heads, and of course, chief among them, Jamie Dimon, in terms of that changing macro environment with the yield curve, with the coronavirus. We're due to hear from Jamie Dimon at 11:45 a.m. Things will kick off with CFO Jem Piepzak at 8 a.m. Guys?
Hey, Wilf, before you go, in terms of some of these projects that JPMorgan is no longer going to finance, is there any estimate on what that will cost the bank?
Didn't see that in the slides. Clearly, it will come at a cost. I think that is the big thing you can commend them for. They don't have to do this. There's no law requiring it, and it will certainly cost them something. Of course, the critic could argue, well, why now? Why didn't you do this earlier? The science hasn't changed for a decade. And they can point to the fact they did $175 billion of financing last year, upping it to about $200 this year. We'll get more detail on that, no doubt, in the day ahead.